Okay, so you probably haven't seen me before. I'm Eddie Donnelly. I'm with Keller Williams Greater Metropolitan. I'm the Director of Growth there. Michael Rapaski is out today, and I am working with you on your exam. So let's get some things going in the chat. Let's start off by putting in, what it is that you're working on and what you'd like us to focus on today. So we can kind of go through the categories. So if there are any areas that you want to pay particular interest to, let's go ahead and put those into the chat. So far, nothing. Everybody's all good, So no areas of interest. So, I'll start by kind of going over everything. So, when it comes to the real estate exam, there are certain areas that are weighted more heavily that you're going to have more questions over. So, as far as the national portion of the exam, there are going to be 4 categories that you want to make sure that you're focusing on. And this is in order of importance and in order of like the weight of questions, like how many questions they have in each. Contracts is going to be number 1. Then you're going to go with general principles and agencies, then practice of real estate, then financing. So 53 of the 80 questions are going to be around those categories. So if you focus on those and get those at a really high level, then you can pretty much miss the rest. You can guess on the rest of them and pretty much pass on the national. So, those are the 4 categories that you really want to focus on and make sure you know at a high level. Again, contracts number 1, practice of real estate, general principles of principles of agency first, then practice of real estate, then financing. And when it comes towards the state portion of the exam, it's license, laws, and rules, and then brokerage relationships. So that's going to be 30 to 40%. I mean, not 30, 40%. That's going to be 30 out of the 40 questions that you're going to have on the state exam. So 30 of the 40 questions are going to be license, laws, and rules, and brokerage relationships. So if you just focus on those at a high level, it should be, you should be able to get through the exam pretty easily. So calculating principal and interest, property ownership, and transfer of title. Okay. Cap rates. Okay. All right. So we're going to get going here. And let me see if I've got any more people that need to get into the room. Okay. Got some more people joining now. All right, so I'm actually going to put that into the chat. So areas of study. Important. Oh, I guess I shouldn't have hit enter. Contracts. National exam. So number 1 is contracts. Number 2 is general principles. Number 3 is practice of real estate. And number 4 is financing. State portion. Number 1 is license, law, and rules. Number 2 is brokerage relationships. So that pretty much breaks down the areas that if you study those, you're going to pass the test. All right, so let's take a look at the exam. So we had not necessarily, I mean, vocabulary is important, and at the same time, that's not going to be a huge part of your test. You should know what the words mean, because it's going to matter. So the vocabulary matters when it relates to any of those topics that I just wrote down. So if it relates to a brokerage relationship, yes, the vocabulary matters because you'll need to know the difference between the terms. If it relates to how property is owned, yes, you'll need to know the difference between the different ownership types. Will they have a ton of questions on that? Probably not as many, but you will need to know that. So yes, there. Let me admit her. Okay, so you will need to know those vocabulary parts, and we're going to start with contracts. Let me go back. Cap rate, property ownership, and transfer of title. Calculating principals and interests. So we'll do transfer of title. All right, launch practice test. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you hear me again? Okay. For some reason, it stopped sharing audio when I did the share screen. Okay, so we're going to get right into it. And let me see so how this is going to work. We're going to read through the question. Can everybody see the screen? Can everybody see the question? All right, so we're going to read through the question, and it's multiple choice. So we're going to do it as like a 1 through 4. So put in, you know, which one you think is the right answer. So which statement concerning a settlement or closing statement is true? Number 1, a closing statement is a simultaneous listing of debits and credits to the respective buyer and seller. Number 2, there is a corresponding credit for a buyer and a debit for a seller on all charges on a closing statement. Number 3, there is a corresponding debit for a seller and credit for a buyer for all charges on a closing statement. Number 4, the real estate agent's commission is a credit to the buyer side of a closing statement. So put your answers in. So we got 1, 1, 1, 1. All right. Let's see. Check answer. All right. So correct. Closing statement doesn't include corresponding debits and credits to either buyer or seller. So everybody got that right. So I think we're good to move on there. Next question. A buyer insists that a seller sign a document that states there are no unrecorded liens against the property, and the seller is the rightful and lawful owner. The buyer is asking the seller to sign a hypothecation clause, affidavit of title, agency disclosure statement, or property disclosure statement. right, let me see. What are people saying? Oh. Okay. So hang on, let me go back to the chat. So I've got some twos, I got some fours, twos, fours, fours. All right. So a lot of people are saying 2 and a lot of people are saying 4. So unrecorded liens is not going to be a property disclosure statement. So property disclosure statements just talk about the property itself. So it's going to disclose things like, is the roof solid? Are there any water leaks? Are there any issues with the foundation? So it's going to, property disclosure statements are about the property itself. Now, and oh, I think I went back. How do I go back? I don't know. I don't know how to go back. So this is my first one of these. But yeah, so property disclosure, it's going to be affidavit of title on that. So on a closing statement, a new mortgage loan is usually a 1, credit to the buyer, 2, debit to the seller, debit to the buyer, or credit to the seller. What we got? On a closing statement, a new mortgage loan is usually, so this is a closing statement. So I see some 1s. So it's a credit to the buyer. So this is a closing statement. A buyer is buying the house. So the mortgage is a credit to the buyer, a debit to the seller, a debit to the buyer, or a credit to the seller. So I see a lot of 1s. So we're going to say credit to the buyer. Correct. So a new mortgage loan is a credit to the buyer because just in real estate, there's mortgager and mortgagee. So a new mortgage loan is neither a debit or credit to the seller. The credit is something you get, and because the buyer is getting a mortgage, that's why it's a credit. A title search can be conducted by a buyer's real estate agent looking after the client's interest, the loan processor, an attorney at law, or anyone. 4s, all right. Check answer, correct. Anyone can go to the public record and search a title. So you all were right. This is a great group. You guys are getting these, no problem. All right, once a person has gone to the courthouse and reviewed all documents pertaining to the property he intends to buy, he is said to have constructive notice, ad valorem notice, actual notice, or caveat emptor. So I see some 3s, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. All right, so actual notice. Correct. So the law holds that everyone has constructive notice or presumed knowledge of recorded documents. Once an individual actually sees the documents that pertain to the ownership of the property, he has actual notice. Caveat emptor refers to let the buyer beware, so that's buyer beware of physical defects in the property, and it has nothing to do with title search. And ad valorem is a Latin phrase meaning according to value. So actual notice. All right, way to go. You guys crushed it. So practice testing. So we're going to go to contracts. Melissa went to the dry cleaner and dropped off her good wool coat to be clean. When the clerk accepted the coat, Melissa and the dry cleaning operation had just entered into which type of contract? Is it a complete contract, an implied contract, an executed contract, or a unilateral contract? So lots of twos. All right, so it's an implied contract. Let's see, correct. So an implied contract is an agreement that has not been put into words. So that's an implied contract. Now, a listing agreement states that the property will be listed starting today and the listing will terminate upon the property being sold. Which statement is true? The listing is invalid as it does not contain a definite date of expiration. When the property sells, the broker will be due a commission. The buyer can determine when the listing will end. The listing will lapse within a reasonable time. Ones, I got a 2 in there. 1, 1, 1, 1. Correct. In most states, a listing agreement must begin on a definite start date and end on a definite date of expiration. So if it's between, and again, the listing agreement is between the broker and the seller. So remember that the listing is with the firm, not the agent. So the buyer is not a party to the agreement, and it does have to have a definite start and a definite end date. All right, an option agreement is a bilateral contract, both a bilateral contract and a unilateral contract, neither a bilateral contract nor a unilateral contract, or just a unilateral contract. So let's see, I see some 4s, see some 1s, 4s, 1s, 4s, 1s, okay. So this one's split. So, oh, I got a 3 in there. All right. So we've got a split on this one. So an option agreement. So we're going to check the 4 because it's a unilateral contract. So it's a fully negotiated unilateral contract in which the optioner or offeror irrevocably agrees to hold the offer open for a certain time in return for the optionee or offeree's payment of the option money. So while the optioner is obligated to complete the contract, the optionee is under no obligation to complete. However, when the optionee does give the optioner notice of intent to complete the contract, the optionee becomes bound and the contract becomes a bilateral contract with obligations on both sides. So an option is just basically saying, you know, hey, I'd like to buy this. Will you hold it for me? Let me admit this person. And the other person says, yes, I'll hold it. But it makes the person who asks for them to hold it is under no obligation to actually buy it. Does that make sense to everyone? Thumbs up, thumbs down if it doesn't, and I can kind of go back over it. Throw it in the chat. Okay, so yes, it's a unilateral contract because only one person is obligated. The other person does not have to perform on the contract. All right. A home buyer wishes to make an offer on a home, but has little money. On the contract, he puts down $0 as earnest money. Which of the following is true regarding the validity of this contract? The minimum earnest money must be at least 1% of the offering price. Or number 2, even if the seller signs the contract, the buyer is not bound to it. Number 3, the contract is not valid without earnest money. Or number 4, the contract when signed by the seller is fully enforceable. Got 4s, lots of 4s, 4, 4, 4. You guys are a good group. You're ready. You're ready for these tests. So there's no requirement for earnest money. So although it's a good practice to put earnest money down, there's no requirement for it. Most sellers are going to look for it, and at the same time, it's a way for the buyer to have, they're looking for the buyer to have, in a sense, some skin in the game. And at the same time, it's not necessary. It's not mandatory. All right. Seller Sam decides to purchase buyer Bob's home. He submits a written offer stipulating that time is of the essence and that the offer must be accepted in writing before 12 o'clock noon, 3 days hence. On the third day at 11:30 a.m., buyer Bob telephones seller Sam to say he has decided to accept the offer as written. Do the parties have a binding contract? So buyer Bob telephones seller Sam to say he has decided to accept the offer. So number 1, yes, Sam cannot revoke the offer. Number 2, no, acceptance was not made in the manner specified. No, buyer Bob didn't wait until noon to accept. Or yes, buyer Bob communicated acceptance to Sam. All right, we got 2s. Got a 4 in there, another 4. Okay, so it's between these two. So some say no, acceptance was not made in the manner specified because it said stipulating that time is of the essence, offer must be accepted in writing before 12 noon. Or yes, buyer Bob communicated acceptance to seller Sam. Okay, so we're going to check that answer. So number 2. Because it was written that offer must be in writing, because that was a stipulation, it makes this answer correct. So if the offer specifies a particular manner of acceptance, the acceptance won't be effective unless those instructions are followed exactly. So until acceptance is communicated properly, in this case in writing, the offerer can still revoke the offer. So again, in a normal situation, if that were not written that way, yes, they acceptance by like verbal acceptance saying, yes, we have signed or yes, we accept can be held. That can actually be held as acceptance of offer and a contract being formed. And so in this situation, because they stipulated how it must be, that was not a contract. All right. John, a buyer, makes an offer on Mary's home. Mary feels the offer is too low and makes a counter offer. John is not interested in paying any more than his original offer, so he doesn't reply to Mary's counter offer. 2 weeks later, Mary is desperate to sell and calls John to accept his original offer. Does John have to purchase Mary's home at his original offer price? Number 1, yes, he is bound by the original offer that Mary has now accepted. Number 2, no, too much time has passed before Mary accepted. Number 3, yes, as long as Mary has signed the original offer. And number 4, no, John has no obligation to purchase. Yep, everybody knew that one. All right, number 4, no, John has no obligation. When Mary made the counter offer, it made John's original offer null and void. So he has no obligation to purchase Mary's home. A contract is entered into on fraudulent terms introduced by the seller. Upon discovery of the fraud by the buyer, the contract would be A, valid, or 1, valid, 2, voidable by the seller, 3, void, or 4, voidable by the seller, or by the buyer, sorry. 2 is by the seller, 4 is by the buyer. So a contract is entered into on fraudulent terms introduced by the seller. So everybody's got, I see fours, 4, 4, 4. Correct. So in cases of fraud against the buyer of real estate, the buyer may affirm or disaffirm the contract within a reasonable time after the truth is discovered. The contract would be voidable by the buyer until he disaffirmed it. At that point, the contract would be void. If the buyer affirmed the contract, then it would be valid. Susan offered to trade her 4-bedroom, 3-story townhome near the subway station for John's 1-room cabin in the mountains. John promptly accepted her offer. A week later, at Susan's attorney's office, they signed a contract setting forth the even swap. In light of the apparent wide disparity in the values of the two properties, is Susan obligated to fulfill her side of the agreement if she changes her mind before closing? So number one, yes, if all elements of a valid contract are present, the adequacy and equality of consideration is not critical to its validity. Number two, no, Susan was under undue influence. 3, no, John is obviously taking unfair advantage. 4, yes, Susan initiated the transaction. So I see number 1's in there, which is correct. The adequacy or value of the consideration that one party gives to the other does not have to equal what the other party gives in order to have a binding contract. So in this situation, undue influence was apparently not an issue. And due to the delay prior to signing the contract and the accessibility of third-party advice, John may be taking advantage, but apparently not unfairly. Seller Joe's agent personally delivered Mary's offer to buy his house. Joe said he would like to think about it for a couple of days. Later that week, without making a single change in the contract, Joe decided to accept Mary's offer and signed it. Then he addressed it to Mary and went to the post office and mailed it. Is the contract binding on both parties? So yes, because all that was required was Joe's signature. Yes, because Joe sent it to Mary in the mail. Or no, because Joe didn't give it back to his agent. Or no, because Mary hadn't received it from her agent. So I see some 4, a 1, 2s, 2s, 4s. So we're a little split on this one. So we're going to click number 2. So once it's in the mail, it forms a contract. So as soon as they place it in the mail, it becomes a contract. It did need Joe's signature, that was true, but that's not all it required. So the thing about the real estate test is you have to make sure you read the words as they're written, because they will put certain words in there just to kind of trip you up, because it says all that was required. So yes, it required a signature, but it also needed to be put into the mail or conveyed. And the conveyance was when the contract was formed. So Joe didn't have to give it back to his agent, and Mary didn't have to receive it. It just had to be in the mail. The mailbox rule says that when acceptance isn't communicated directly, either in person or over the telephone, it is effective as soon as it is placed in the U.S. mail to the offerer. So again, back to that other question, when an acceptance isn't communicated directly, either in person or over the telephone. So remember, if you tell someone that you are under contract, or the seller or the buyer has signed, you are forming a contract. So be careful not to you don't want to call an offer a contract. And mistakes have been made there where someone talks about an offer and called it a contract, and that formed the contract. So be careful with that. Who is authorized to rescind a voidable contract? The agent and the seller only, either party, neither party, only a void contract may be rescinded, only the minor. All right, we got twos so far. Twos. So far, everybody agrees on two. So who is authorized to rescind a voidable contract? Incorrect. Only the minor. So only a voidable contract may be rescinded, and only by the injured party. A minor is not held accountable in a real estate contract and therefore may rescind the contract due to lack of contractual capacity. A void contract is not really a contract at all because it lacks one of the essential elements or is defective in some other way and therefore is unenforceable. So a voidable contract is only the minor. Walton decides to sell his cabin on the lake and offers it in a letter to his regular postman, Bill, at a price of $5,000. The next day, Walton receives a note from a neighbor, a close friend of the postman, who says, "I accept your offer." Is Walton obligated to sell to the neighbor? So number one, yes, because both the offer and the acceptance were in writing. Number two, yes, because the acceptance was within 3 days. Number three, no, because only the offeree can accept an offer. Or number four, no, because no licensed agent was involved. Threes everywhere. Correct. No one but the offeree can accept an offer. Now, and some contracts are able to be transferred, but this isn't a contract. This is an offer. So no one but the offeree can accept the offer. So the neighbor is presenting a new offer. John and Mary are getting a divorce. John tells Mary that unless she agrees to sell their home immediately and split the proceeds, he will institute legal proceedings to gain custody of the children. If she agrees, the sales contract may be then voidable because of offer and acceptance 1, consideration 2, legality of object 3, or duress 4. See the fours. Correct. Duress is a useful defense against enforcing a contract because there is no genuine meeting of the minds. A contract entered into under duress is not enforceable against the forced party. Consideration, offer, acceptance, and legality of object are all essential elements of a contract. So remember, essential elements of a contract: consideration, offer, acceptance, and legality of object. Ben is not quite ready to purchase, so he rents a home with the option to purchase after 2 years. This option to purchase is an example of a bilateral contract, mutual contract, promise and exchange, or unilateral contract. Fours. All right, everybody guesses 4. Correct. Options, which we talked about earlier, are unilateral or one-way contracts. An option requires the optioner to complete the purchase if the optionee so elects, keeps the offer open for a specified time, makes the seller liable for a commission, gives the optionee an easement on the property. Ones and twos. Ones. Incorrect. So 1 was right, requires the optioner to complete the purchase if the optionee so elects. The seller is committed to a commission through a listing agreement. The right to use another's property for a particular purpose is an easement. An offer is a proposal, while an option is a contract. Adam and Jenny enter into an agreement wherein Adam will buy Jenny's house at the asking price if Jenny will install a new roof, and if Adam can qualify for a loan sufficient to cover the purchase. Until the roof is installed and the financing obtained, the contract is said to be rescinded, executed, voidable, or executory. Fours, got 3 in there. Another 3. Okay. So an executory contract is one in which the parties have agreed to the terms, but conditions still remain to be fulfilled by the parties. Once all conditions are met and all that remains is the closing, the contract is said to be complete and executed. So a voidable contract is one that may be rescinded, and a contract that has been rescinded is void. All right, so let's see, we're gonna go back to here and let's look. We had, let me see if I can find some to go over. Valuation and market analysis. So here's the thing, like I said, valuation and market analysis, land use controls and regulations, transfer of title, a lot of these aren't going to be really high on your list. So again, the top categories, 53 of the 80 questions you're going to look at on your real estate exam are contracts are number 1, general principles is number 2, practice of real estate, where is that? Yeah, practice of real estate is number 3, and financing is number 4. So that's 53 of the 80 questions you're going to actually go over, you're going to have on your test. So on the national portion. So a lot of these other ones, you may see a couple questions on them. And I would say the best thing you can do in your time is to focus on those 4 categories, because that's going to be the majority of the questions that you're going to find on the test. So let's see, let's look at financing. So a GI loan is the same as a VA loan, conventional loan, FHA, or co-insured. 1, 1, 1, 1. Correct. GI loan, often referred to as a soldier's loan, is through the Veteran Administration, so is not insured as an FHA loan. Conventional loans are not backed by the federal government in any way, and a co-insured loan is one where more than one entity is insuring the loan. So which type of single mortgage loan exists when 2 or more different parcels of property are offered as security for the loan? So which type of single mortgage loan when 2 or more different parcels of property are offered as security for the loan? So a fixed rate, a blanket, a variable rate, or a wraparound. 2s, 2, 2, 2. So lots of 2s. All right, so a blanket loan. Correct. So a single mortgage loan that has multiple properties as collateral is called a blanket mortgage. So a single mortgage that covers more than one loan is a wraparound mortgage. So wraparound is when you have 2 different properties that you're wrapping around, and as far as like 2 different loans to go from one loan to the next. And a single mortgage that has the same rate of interest over the entire loan as a fixed rate loan, and variable rate just means that the rate is going to change as the market value of the rates change. In a foreclosure sale, the debtor is freed of any future responsibility regarding the liens, number 1. Number 2, may be a successful bidder and be awarded the title of the property. Number 3, advertises to secure exposure for the sale. Or number 4, may not bid on the property. Twos, twos, twos. Huh. All right, everybody thinks 2. Correct. So anyone may bid on a sheriff's foreclosure auction. If the property does not bring enough for the sale, proceeds to cover the liens, then the debtor is not freed from future responsibility and is liable on the note under a deficiency judgment. A homeowner receives a duplicate 1099 form from the bank showing how much interest has been paid over the last year and what principal amount is remaining on the mortgage. This document is a certificate of habitation, 2, certificate of title, estoppel certificate, or 4, certificate of sale. I got 3s. 3, 3, 3. Some 2s. 3s. All right, so an estoppel certificate. Correct. Certificate of title, also known as an opinion letter, states that the title is vested in a particular individual. A certificate of sale is issued to a buyer at a judicial sale and entitles a buyer to the deed upon confirmation of sale by the court. An estoppel certificate, sometimes called a certificate of no defense, is a legal instrument used by the bank to stop the mortgage and to indicate what the mortgage balance is on a certain date. So it stops the mortgage at that date and tells you what it is at that certain time, after which the mortgager has no defense unless they contest in a timely manner. A certificate of habitation would be an occupancy permit issued by the local government. All right. The type of lender with the greatest percentage of assets invested in residential mortgages is a mutual savings bank, commercial bank, savings and loan, or life insurance company. All right, 3s. Okay, savings and loan, correct. It's the most invested. The premise of a savings and loan is to take the deposits in savings accounts and use them to make loans for depositors. A buyer agrees to purchase real property by making monthly payments to the seller and then receiving a deed at a later point in time. Such an agreement is known as a construction loan, straight-term mortgage, land installment contract, or certificate of sale. So I see 3s. A lot of 3s in here. So land installment contract. Correct. So, it's an installment payment plan. Everybody seemed to get that. So which loan is not guaranteed or insured by a government agency? FHA, amortized, conventional, or VA? All right, got 3s. We actually just talked about that a few questions back. So yes, FHA loans are insured by the government. VA loans are guaranteed by the government. Amortized mortgage includes regular periodic payments to pay off a debt, and a conventional loan is not guaranteed or insured by a government agency. So amortized is just the way the loan is set up. Interim financing used during construction of a building, followed by a long-term financing, is called a FHA mortgage, conventional loan, bridge loan, or construction loan. Yeah, right there in the question. So everybody pretty much got that one right. After buying property at a sheriff's foreclosure auction, Which document would a person receive to prove he is entitled to the deed upon confirmation of sale? We just talked about that in the previous question. So certificate of habitation, certificate of no defense, certificate of sale, or certificate of title. So got fours and threes, 4, 4, 4, 4. It's certificate of sale, because it's not certificate of title, because it hasn't been confirmed by the court. So a certificate of sale is what's issued at the judicial sale. So it entitles the buyer to a deed upon confirmation of sale by the court. So certificate of title, also known as an opinion letter, is issued by a lawyer who has examined an abstract and has given an opinion stating the title is vested in a certain individual. So that's just a certificate saying that a certain person holds the title. But the certificate of sale is what you receive at an auction. All right. Each January, a homeowner receives an estoppel certificate from his bank indicating the amount of real property taxes the homeowner will owe for the upcoming year, closing costs incurred in selling the home, amount of the taxes and insurance held in escrow, or amount of principal remaining on the mortgage. So we just went over this. Yep. And you all got it. So we just talked about an estoppel certificate. So you all had it all. You all had it right. So we've gone over practice real estate, contracts, financing, general principles of agency. All right. So two brokers get together at breakfast meeting and decide they will each agree to work in certain geographical areas of the town. What statute has been violated? Equal Credit Opportunity Acts, Civil Rights Law, Sherman Antitrust Act, Federal Housing Antitrust Law. Now remember, general principles of agency is your number 2 category. So this has more questions on it than almost everything else in your exam. So these are things you definitely want to study up on. So let's see, what do we got? 4s, 3, 4, 4, 4, 3. All right, a couple 3s. So we're split on this one. So it's either Sherman Antitrust or Federal Housing Antitrust. So it's Sherman. The Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits monopolization. So price fixing and market fixing would be 2 examples of a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. So this one was the Sherman Antitrust because they met and they decided they would each work geographical areas of town. So they split it. That way they can hold their, essentially hold their prices and not have to compete with each other. So that's the Sherman Antitrust Act. One who acts or has the power to act for another is termed the client, the customer, the principal, or the agent. All right, we got a number 4, number 4, 4. Okay, we're going to go with 4, and that's correct. So an agent acts on behalf of another and owes the principal and or client fiduciary duties. The customer is not represented by anyone. And just remember that, the difference between a client and a customer. A customer isn't actually represented, a client is. So they are customers until they are clients. A person authorized to act on behalf of another, well, we just did that. Interesting. And ask the same question twice again, apparently. For a broker to act for more than one party in a real estate transaction without the knowledge and consent of all parties is acceptable as long as no party suffers actual monetary damage. 2, grounds for disciplinary actions. 3, ethical. Or 4, contrary to Board of Realtor bylaws. Twos, and a number 4. Grounds for disciplinary action. So the law states, so the realtor bylaws are one thing. The law states that all parties have to have knowledge. So if you are to go into a transaction and you represent both sides, you put it in writing, have them sign it, and then that way it becomes legal. And then you will not be disciplined for that. So as long as they have agreed, they have been made aware, and they have agreed to it in writing, then you are safe to move forward in dual agency. I don't recommend dual agency. It's a tricky minefield. The person authorized to act in place of someone else in legal matters is called attorney in fact, attorney at law, power of attorney, or pro se. So I've got a 1 there. All right, so I got 3 people who've answered. There are more people on the call, so there might be some confusion on this one. So number 3, power of attorney. Okay, so we got 1 and 3. Number 2. Okay, so we do have some dispute over this one. So the person authorized to act in place of someone else in legal matters. So most of you said number 2. That's incorrect. It's attorney in fact. So number 1, the person designated under a power of attorney to act on behalf of another is called an attorney in fact. So the power of attorney gives that person the right to act in their stance. So they're an attorney in fact. An attorney at law is an actual attorney that's licensed, but to practice by this, licensed to practice law by the state. So, but may not be granted all the power of attorney in fact. The words pro se mean for oneself. If a buyer client of a broker wants to purchase a property listed by the broker, which of the following is true? As long as the listing salesperson and salesperson representing the buyer are different, no disclosure is required since there is no conflict of interest. The buyer and seller must give their informed consent in order for the broker to represent both of them in the transaction. The buyer agency must be terminated before the sales agreement it is entered into, or the broker must refer one of the parties to a different broker to avoid conflict of interest. All right, so we just went over this. So yes, number 2 is correct. A relationship between one person, principal, and another agent, wherein the agent is given the right to act on behalf of the principal in a business setting, is usually called involuntary servitude, trespass, an agency relationship, or customer representation. Threes across the board. Correct. So there's no such thing as customer representation. An agent may work with a customer, but may not lawfully work for a customer. So trespass is when a person is on another's property without permission, and involuntary servitude is slavery. So which of the following would terminate an agency relationship between a seller and a listing broker? The broker's offer of cooperation extended to other broker members of the local multiple listing service, or the seller's refusal to accept the full price offer presented by the broker. Death of the salesperson who secured the listing for the brokerage company, or bankruptcy of the seller through operation of law. So fours and threes, fours, threes. Okay. So death of the salesperson, remember the agent isn't the one who's in the contract with the seller, the brokerage is. So the death of the salesperson would have nothing to do with the actual agreement, the listing agreement or the buyer agency agreement. So bankruptcy of the seller through operation of law would terminate that contract. This is standard. The offer of cooperation extending to members of the local multiple listing service is how you sell the property. And the seller's to refuse to accept the full price offer. Remember now that obligates the seller to a commission to the broker. Do they actually ever go after that? Not really. And it does not terminate the relationship. A seller never has to accept an offer. An agent is one who is owed a fiduciary duty to, or is owed a fiduciary duty, or is represented by another, or acts or has the power to act for another, or represents the agent of another. 3. All right. Okay. So an attorney, in fact, is best described as a power of attorney, principal in a buyer agency, attorney at law, or agent authorized to act on behalf of a principal. Okay, got fours. Correct. All right. So we've gone through the 4 categories that are the major categories in the national exam. We're coming up on the end of our time, and I'm going to open it up to questions. You can take yourself off mute. I'm going to stop sharing now. You can take yourself off mute and ask questions. We can talk about real estate as it stands, the actual practice of real estate. We can talk about the exam. You tell me, how do you want to spend the last few minutes? Feel free to chime in. I have been a practicing real estate agent for the last, I guess, 8 years. I am the director of growth for the Market Center. How much math is on the exam? Not a lot. There's some. You're not going to face a lot of math on the exam. It will ask you some questions, but again, your major questions are going to be in those 4 categories. You might have some questions around finance. You might have some questions around the actual closing disclosure. But there's not going to be a ton of math. Good question, though. It is good to know the math, though. Knowing how to do the cap rate, knowing how to do those things is good. Now, ask me, have I done it? I've done a cap rate, but I've not done the actual math for a cap rate. I use the computer. So once you get through the exam, will you ever actually do it again? Probably not. It's just like certain math classes in high school. Yes, it's good for you to know it. Will you ever use it? Most people are going to say no. So it's, that's how the math works on that one. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or take yourself off mute. Did you get anything out of today? Did you learn something new, or did it help you on what you'll need to know for the exam? Yes. All right, great. All right, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help you get past the exam, and you take yours Saturday. Excellent. Well, good luck. You know, it's not, take your time, read the questions. That's, you know, the best advice I can get you is just make sure you read the questions, because they can be worded in a way that will trip you up. So just read through it and don't overthink it, because I actually made some mistakes on my original exam by thinking, well, in this particular case, it is this, you know, because I actually had my license before I came to Ohio. My name is Eddie Donnelly. I'll put it in the chat. So I had my license in North Carolina, and I came to Ohio, and Ohio is not reciprocal. So I had to retake everything, go through the whole class again, take my exam in Ohio, even though I was a licensed agent for 6 years. And so when I got here, I overthought some of the questions, because I said, well, in practice, yes, this applies. They're looking for the obvious answer. You know, whatever's the most straightforward, obvious answer, that's what they're looking for. So just read the question thoroughly, and that'll help you the most. Is, you know, don't overthink it, read the question, and you should be fine. All right. Well, if no other questions, I appreciate everyone coming in, and yeah, thank you all for being here, and you know, we'll see you next time. And let us know how we can